So, Mr. Chidi, we can start now.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Engineer Chidi Izuwa, Director General of the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission of Nigeria, welcoming you to this very wonderful webinar on behalf of all our sponsors, the Cross River State Government, Health Invest, and Phase 3 Communications, and also all our partners. We're truly very lucky to have a star-studded panel today, with experiences around the world. I mean, COVID-19 has been very impactful for the world. I think it's important that we understand them and understand how PPPs can be a help, to boost what nations are doing. We're truly honored to have panelists, a very gender diverse panelists across the world. We're also extremely lucky, to have the Honorable Minister of State for Health in Nigeria, a really very famous medical doctor who is playing a very, very key role in Nigeria's presidential task force for COVID-19 management, present with us to give us a ministerial. The Honorable Minister, we are truly very honored that out of your extremely very tight schedule, you found time to be with us. Thank you very much, sir. And also thank you to all the other panelists, who have found time, to be with us here today. We also, at the end of this session, we're going to have the Emir of Shonga, His Royal Highness Dr. Haliru Yahaya, who is also a very, very famous medical doctor, be able to give us a closing remark. So I truly want to welcome you. I don't want to speak for so long because there is so much experience to be shared from what, Mohit, Natalia, and all the panelists, would say. So at this juncture, it is my very distinct pleasure and honor on behalf of my commission, my colleagues, on behalf of our sponsors, on behalf of all our partners from across the World Association, and you're going to see the slides of all the partners, to please welcome to this webinar the Honorable Minister for State for Health in Nigeria, the very, very diligent, elegant gentleman, Dr. Adeleke Mamora, who is a very famous medical doctor. Those who know the Nimbus Hospital in Lagos, what his reputation is like. Dr. Mamora has been a very successful Nigerian. He was the Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly for 8 years, 22 years ago. So a lot of the legal framework you've seen create the success of Lagos, it's due to the hard work of Dr. Mamora. Dr. Mamora, I am honored to welcome you to give us a ministerial address. Thank you very much, everybody, and God bless you.
Yes, Chidi, thank you very much for inviting me, as it were, to this very, very auspicious webinar. Right. Now, thank you very much for your kind words, Chidi, once again. And I'm quite delighted to be part of this. Well, I think before making my remarks, let me quote Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, as we all know, is a ruler of Dubai in particular, in the United Arab Emirates. He made a statement just recently in respect of this pandemic. And what did he say? He said, the world has long been questioning where the true power lies. And he asked the question, does economy drive politics or the other way around? he went further to say the coronavirus spread has shown that healthcare is the main power that shapes the economy and politics at a time when a disease brought nations to a standstill. And I think those words are words on marble. So I am delighted to be part of this very important Zoom meeting on PPP, public-private partnership in healthcare and the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken the entire world unaware and has caused so many fatalities in its wake. I wish to state that globally, and material resources to enable effective containment of this global scourge. Our weak our health care facilities are seriously struggling to keep up with the increasing number of cases in the country. COVID-19 pandemic is added to the existing injury of decayed healthcare infrastructure and obsolete equipment. It has therefore become imperative sector in the circumstance is therefore inevitable. In view of the fact that government alone cannot finance the strengthening of the health system due to paucity of funds and competing national needs. Public-private partnership has been considered a valuable option of healthcare financing. And the Federal Ministry of Health, working in collaboration with the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, is looking at the various PPP models for financing the federal tertiary health institutions in Nigeria. It is therefore a great opportunity for me to learn from the experience of experts on PPP in healthcare from other countries. I thank the Director General Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, Engineer Chidi Izua, all the panelists, participants, and sponsors of this webinar that promises not only to be exciting and educative, but also fruitful. I thank you for your kind attention.
Yeah, Honorable Minister, that's really a very, very heartwarming, wonderful, and very sobering speech. And I truly want to thank you for, the welcome to the rest of the world and what you have shared. And I also want to thank you for finding time, to grace this. If we were, not in the new normal, would have given you a big round of applause. I think we still need to develop the technology for round of applauses at WebMeer. So that's work in progress. But I think you made the fundamental point, which is what in His Royal Highness, the ruler of Dubai, has said. Where does the real power lie? What has happened with COVID-19 has shown that the real power is in healthcare. Just before I hand over, to Mohit to start the presentation, just a little bit of housekeeping. We have a lot of, attendees at this, session. We will not be able to answer everybody's questions, but please, we will try as much as possible to answer questions. So use the Q&A box or the chat box for your questions. Put down your email. If we don't select your question for answering, We will commit to you that we will, after, get the panelists to answer your questions and then revert to you by email. At this juncture, please permit me to hand over to Mohit. Mohit, you're welcome to share your presentation.
Thank you, sir. Very good morning and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mohit Ganediwala, and I am Director in CRISIL Infrastructure Advisory. I lead projects related to public-private partnerships in CRISIL. On behalf of CRISIL Infrastructure Advisory, I welcome you all to this webinar. Just to give a brief profile of myself, I have work experience of more than 15 years. I have been working with CRISIL for last 13 years. I have experience of working on projects in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and African countries. I have worked on projects in countries like India, Tanzania, Kenya, Mauritius, Lesotho, Bahrain, Indonesia, to name a few. I have worked on projects across the PPP project life cycle, covering PPP pipeline, PPP policy, capacity building, pre-feasibility studies, feasibility studies, bid process management, and I have also been involved in establishment of infrastructure funds. I have been working with some of the esteemed clients like World Bank, European Union, Asian Development Bank, AFW, DFID, French Development Agency, to name a few. Basically, I have been involved in projects in sectors of municipal markets, education and healthcare, urban infrastructure, covering sectors like water supply, solid waste management, sanitation, and urban transportation. So that was a brief about myself and what I have been doing in CRISIL. In terms of flow of this presentation, I will briefly cover about CRISIL, what CRISIL as an entity is involved into, and what we have been doing for last 30 odd years. Then we will make a presentation on healthcare sector, wherein we will do a comparative presentation on healthcare infrastructure in countries like Nigeria, India, and Abu Dhabi. And we'll compare it with some of the developed nations in the world like USA, Australia, UK, Australia. Then I will briefly talk about the PPPs in healthcare sector in India, which are the sectors in which PPP projects have been implemented, what have been the benefits, and what have been the learnings from the same. That is what I will be covering in module 3. The module 4 will cover case studies on PPP projects. And here we will look at covering case studies across sectors like primary healthcare, secondary healthcare, and tertiary healthcare. We will also look at different PPP models and how they have been implemented. The fifth agenda on the item is to discuss how the country of Nigeria can go about implementing PPP projects in the healthcare sector. And finally, I will cover the measures taken by Government of India for the COVID-19 and what we have been doing and what are some of the measures. So this is what I am going to cover in my presentation today. Just to give a brief background on CRISIL. CRISIL was established in 1987 as India's first rating agency. In last 33 years, we have grown to a 3,700 employee strong company with a turnover of more than $250 million. We are the largest rating agency in India today. We are owned by S&P Global, which is world's largest rating agency, and they have 68% shareholding in CRISIL. CRISIL has offices in 23 countries around the globe. So apart from India, where we are headquartered, we have offices in United States, Argentina, UK, China, Hong Kong, and Singapore. We basically have three major divisions: rating, research, and infrastructure advisory. We are part of the CRISIL infrastructure advisory team, and basically CRISIL infrastructure advisory in last 20 plus years has worked on more than 2,800 assignments. These assignments are primarily in the infrastructure sectors. We have worked in more than 38 countries globally and over 20 countries in Africa, in countries like Tanzania, Kenya, Namibia, Ghana, Ethiopia, to name a few. We have a team of close to 200 employees, and this comprises of a very diverse skill set comprising of MBAs, chartered accountants, urban planners, engineers, lawyers. We primarily work with the multilateral agencies, and we have worked with multilaterals like World Bank, Asian Development Bank, African Development Bank, to name a few. CRISIL has been involved in a lot of thought leadership activities, and we regularly host webinars, release reports on economy, on infrastructure sectors. As an advisory company, we are known and valued for trust, ethics, innovation, and excellence. These are some of the attributes in which we take a lot of pride in whatever we do. Moving on, CRISIL Infrastructure Advisory, we have 4 divisions. Transport and logistics is one of the divisions, wherein we work on projects related to airports, ports, railways, highways. In the urban infrastructure sector, we work on projects related to solid waste management, water supply, sanitation, urban transportation. In energy and natural resources, we work on projects related to conventional and renewable energy sources. And in infrastructure financing, we have been primarily working on public-private partnership projects. As I mentioned, we are headquartered in India. Apart from India and Africa, we have worked on projects in countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos, to name a few. In terms of type of work we do, we undertake assignments related to strategy, policy and regulations, sector studies, PPP and project advisory, transaction advisory, due diligence and valuations, and program management, to name a few. Moving on, CRISIL has a global PPP experience, and we have been working across the PPP value chain, starting from project identification, project feasibility, project procurement, project construction operation, and then the handover. Now, basically in this slide, we have tried to detail out some of the eminent assignments on which we have worked on. And one of the such assignments on which we have worked on is the project screening tool of World Bank. This is a global output which was prepared for World Bank. And basically, this is a tool which assesses a PPP project on categories like strategic suitability, preliminary feasibility, risk assessment, PPP suitability, fiscal affordability, and institutional capacity. And it helps government agencies in deciding whether to go ahead with a PPP project or not. So this tool has over 250 questions, and during the project preparation stage, the government agencies, along with the assistance of their consultants, can work on this tool and evaluate the feasibility of a project. So this is one landmark assignment which we have developed in recent past. This was done for World Bank. We have been working on DFID funded and World Bank implemented Tanzania PPP support program for last 3 years. As part of this support program, we have prepared feasibility studies for 16 PPP projects in sectors like municipal markets, solid waste management, student hostels, to name a few. And here we have applied DFID UK 5 case approach. So this is a new approach which has evolved over a period of time to assess PPP projects. And here we have assessed PPP projects on 5 cases. These are strategic case, economic case, financial case, and commercial case. So these are some of the work we have been doing. And as I mentioned, we have been working mostly for the donor agencies, which I have highlighted on the left-hand side of this slide. Moving on, we also have a very strong PPP capacity building experience. So here you would see some slides from the training and capacity building we have done in Tanzania, Indonesia, and India. In India, we have prepared a PPP toolkit for 5 sectors, which covers guidelines for PPP projects, the case studies, reference documents. The PPP toolkit was inaugurated by then Honorable Finance Minister of India, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, as you can see in the photograph on the right-hand side. And we have also been involved in the training of trainers program, wherein all across the India, we have trained trainers for undertaking PPP projects. Apart from this, as I mentioned about the Tanzania program, we have conducted over 10 PPP workshops and clinics in last 2 years in Tanzania, with each clinic of 5 days. And these clinics have been attended by more than 50 officials from a PPP node, PPP center, World Bank, local government authorities, and institutes, to name a few of them. Now, this was a quick brief about CRISIL and myself. Now, here in this section on healthcare comparative analysis, what we are doing is we are doing a comparison of healthcare infrastructure in countries like Nigeria, India, UAE, with some of the developed nations. I think what all of us have seen from the COVID-19 disease, that availability of healthcare infrastructure is very important. If we have adequate number of beds, doctors, and nurses, I think the number of deaths and the percentage of mortality can significantly be controlled. And here we look at the healthcare infrastructure in some of the developed and the emerging economies. Now, if we look at hospital beds per 1,000 population, if we look in countries like Australia, we have 3.8 beds per 1,000 population. Whereas if we compare it with a country like Nigeria or India, it is significantly less at 0.9. Similarly, if we look at number of physicians per 1,000 population, here again, it is high in countries like UK, US, where it is in the range of 2.6 to 3.6. Here again, India and Nigeria is way below as compared to some of the developed countries. Now, one thing which all of us have seen in case of COVID-19 is the availability of ICU beds and the ventilators. If the countries have good infrastructure with respect to ICU beds and ventilators, I think the percentage of casualties can significantly be reduced and controlled. Now, if we compare, for example, Nigeria, the number of ICU beds per 1,000 population in Nigeria is significantly lower as compared to, say, Australia, which is at 0.9. And I think similar trends can also be observed for nurses per 10,000 per 1,000 population. So I think this slide clearly shows that the emerging economies are significantly lacking behind in terms of the healthcare infrastructure and healthcare personnel. I think it's a no-brainer. All of us agree to this, and I think we all realize that the healthcare infrastructure needs to be created on a war footing basis. in the emerging economies. Now, having looked into this infrastructure and looked into the this numbers, I think we need to understand why this is happening. And I think if we look at the healthcare expenditure, we will get a good understanding of the same. Now, if we look at healthcare expenditure as a percentage of GDP, gross domestic product, it is significantly higher in a country like US, where it is close to 18% of the total gross domestic product, whereas in countries like Nigeria and India, it is less than 4%. If we look at the public health expenditure, here again the story is very different. In countries like UAE, US, and UK, the public expenditure is more than 70%, whereas in countries like India and Nigeria, the healthcare infrastructure is primarily dependent on the private sector. And the private sector is spending more than 75 or close to 75% of the expenditure on the healthcare infrastructure. Similarly, if we look at per capita healthcare expenditure, it is significantly low at 241 for India as compared to 9,800 for US or over 4,000 in Australia. I think out of pocket expenditure is a key matrix. Basically, out of pocket expenditure signifies how much of the healthcare infrastructure is being borne by the individuals and how much is being paid by the government agencies. Now, if we look at developed nations like US, UK, because either the healthcare facilities are provided free of cost, or either because the government has good insurance mechanisms, the out-of-pocket expenditure as a percentage of health expenditure is very low in countries like US and UK, but it is very high in countries like India and Nigeria at around 60+%. So this is a key message. Now, what does this lead us to? So what we see basically from the previous slides, the key messages from the previous slides are that the substantial spending of developed nations is reflected in robust healthcare facilities. As I mentioned, developed nations are incurring 10% of GDP on healthcare as compared to 3.5% of GDP by developing nations. Out of pocket expenditure is very high in developing countries at around 65% of total healthcare expenditure. Public expenditure in healthcare is around 75% in developed countries, whereas it is only 25% in developing countries. Now, there is clearly a need to scale up healthcare infrastructure in developing nations, as we see number of beds per 1,000 population, number of physicians per 1,000 population is significantly lower in the developing nations like India and Nigeria. With that as a background, I think before I move on to the next slide, I think it is very important to understand what are the government agencies looking at from PPP in healthcare. What are their expectations? So I think if we look at government agencies and if we look at central government agencies, donor agencies in Nigeria, I think primarily they are looking at PPPs in healthcare to leverage private sector investment, to leverage private sector efficiency. As the Honorable Minister, Mr. Mamora mentioned, the government is looking at increasing healthcare infrastructure through PPP, wherein they want to develop beds, doctors, have more doctors, have more nurses, have more ICUs and ventilators. I think when government is looking at creating infrastructure, they are not looking at high income group. I think the focus of government is to provide healthcare infrastructure for people who are below poverty line, to provide healthcare infrastructure to vulnerable sections of the society, like women, children, poor, who cannot afford healthcare. And at the same time, government is looking at creating healthcare infrastructure across all segments, be it primary healthcare, secondary healthcare, or tertiary healthcare. I think this is a clear objective which the government of Nigeria has with respect to PPPs, and this is what they want to achieve. I think that is the underlying theme with which we move forward in terms of what are the expectations. Now, here in the next couple of slides, I will try to summarize how healthcare PPPs have helped government agencies in India. Now, if we look at some of the PPP projects which have been implemented by government agencies in India, it has helped in improving penetration levels in rural and remote areas. I think that has been one of the foremost objectives which the healthcare PPPs have helped. These have been achieved through community healthcare centers. These have been achieved through mobile health vans. These have been achieved through ambulance services, and we have case studies on these in the subsequent slides, and we will be covering this. PPPs have also helped government agencies in addressing shortage of doctors through development of medical colleges. So we will discuss some of the projects on medical colleges in cities like Jalandhar and Shillong, where medical colleges have been developed for MBBS students through PPP. PPPs have also helped in providing affordable services to below poverty line patients. Now, how do we define below poverty line patients? So basically, as per the various definitions of Government of India, people with per capita expenditure of less than $15 per month is defined as below poverty line patients. So PPP projects have helped government agencies in providing services to vulnerable sections of the society, to poor patients. At the same time, PPPs have also helped in development of tertiary hospital and in development of complex tertiary healthcare services. And here we will look at case studies from cities like Mohali and Bhatinda, where hospitals of 200 beds were developed for tertiary services. PPPs have also helped in availability of sophisticated medical equipment at government hospitals. So here we will talk about diagnostic centers which have been developed in 4 hospitals in Andhra Pradesh. So this is the case study which we will look at in terms of what was the PPP model which was followed. And overall, PPPs are also helping in delivering of healthcare service by attracting larger pool of healthcare services. So if we look at PPP projects, because they are more efficient, because they provide better value for money, the private players have been able to attract doctors and nurses at salaries which are 25 to 50% higher than what government agencies have been able to offer. So this is what the healthcare PPPs have helped the government agencies in India. I think before I go further, I think we need to clearly understand what are the key nuances of PPP projects in healthcare sector. Now, if we look at any PPP project, it typically involves design, finance, construction, operation, maintenance, and transfer. So these typically are 6 to 7 stages of an infrastructure project. And all the PPPs will either have all the 7 stages or 2, 3, 4 stages as per the project structure. So this is what is common in all the PPP projects. However, the nuances are different for each sector. For example, if we look at airports, there are 2 types of revenues: aeronauticals, non-aeronautical. If we look at railways, there are 2 segments. These segments are related to passenger traffic straight profit. So like this in healthcare, what I would say, there are 4 P's, 4 critical P's on which we need to spend significant amount of time before we decide to implement a PPP project in the healthcare sector. Now, these 4 P's are: the first P is the patient who is going to avail the healthcare infrastructure. The second P is related to pricing. What is the price which the private sector can charge? The third P is payment. I think at the end of the day, for all the projects, all the PPP projects which the private sector is implementing, they are not implementing it for charity. They are looking at returns, maybe not making supernormal profits, but profits which are attractive for them. And for that, they need payment in time. And the fourth and the most important P is performance monitoring. This is where I think both government and the private agencies will have their different perspectives. So I think before we get into designing a PPP project, a feasibility study for a PPP project in healthcare, I think we need to be clear about these 4 P's related to patients, pricing, payment, and performance monitoring. Now I have next 4 slides where you will see that these 4 P's have seen significant variations across PPP projects. And this is what you will also see in the case studies which I'm going to present. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if the government is planning to do a PPP project, they don't intend to do it for high income group patients. They will want to do it for people who are below poverty line patients, vulnerable sections who cannot afford healthcare services. So the first category of patients whom we can look at is the below poverty line patients. The second category of patients will be patients who are not below poverty line, but who are involved in government services in some way or other. So like in India, we have 2 government schemes. One is called CGS, Central Government Health Scheme, where the central government employees are covered under this scheme. And similarly, we have ECSH scheme, which is ex-serviceman contributory health scheme. So I think the first category of patients is below poverty line patients. The second category are non-BPL patients, which will cover central government and armed forces employees. It will cover special categories of citizens, such as judges, prisoners. It will also cover referral patients. In many cases, the government hospitals don't have the facilities or they don't have the capacity. And in some cases, they will refer patients from government hospitals to the private hospitals. So this is the third category of patients. And the third category of patients are the private patients, patients which are not covered under the BPL and the referral category. Now, if you design a PPP project, there is a clear-cut conflict. Government will want to focus more on BPL patients and non-BPL patients, non-BPL referral patients, whereas the focus of the private sector will be more on private patients because their ability to pay will be higher. I think the first consideration in a PPP project is to look at what is the segment of patients we are going to cover and what is the percentage allocation. It can be 100% for private, it can be 100 for BPL, it can be 25 BPL, 75 private. So in India, we have seen all sorts of models in PPPs. We have seen 100% private patient PPPs. We have seen 100% BPL PPPs. So I think this is an important consideration which all the government agencies, transaction advisors, consultants need to look into when they start designing the PPP project. The second important consideration, or the second P as I call it, is pricing. How are we going to decide pricing? So generally we see 4 types of pricing. The first pricing is free pricing, wherein services are provided free of cost to the below poverty line patients and the referral patients. The second set of pricing is CGS pricing or ECSH pricing, which is a specialized pricing for central government and armed forces, wherein prices are defined for each city for various clinical services. and cities can nearby cities are pricing is decided at a discounted rate. So this is the second category of pricing. The third category of pricing is state pricing. In India, there are over 30 states. Each state has its own set of pricing, own set of regulations. So I think we also need to look at the state where the project has been developed and what are the local state regulations for the pricing, as the pricing varies from state to state. And the last, and definitely not the least, is the market pricing, wherein prices are determined by private players, or it is capped by the government agencies. So I think these are the four sets of pricing which we have generally seen in PPP projects in India. Here again, the government will be more keen to have pricing towards free pricing or CGS pricing, whereas the tendency or interest of the private sector will be towards state pricing, or the market will be more towards the market pricing. So I think this is the second key, which is very important. The third P is the payment or the reimbursement. At the end of the day, we have a lot of stakeholders from the private sector in this webinar. And I'm sure when we go to the panelists and the speakers who are going to make a presentation, I think we will hear from private sector that they are all interested in PPP projects. They want to collaborate with government. They are happy to be involved to provide services to patients below poverty line. But I think their biggest and one of the key concern is on the payment, whether we'll get payment on time, who will pay us, whether it will be single window, whether we'll get in time, whether we'll get payment, whether there will be deductions, penalties. I think this is one of the biggest concerns in the healthcare PPPs. Now, if we look at reimbursement, so if we look at BPL patients, generally there will be no recovery from the patients. So either the reimbursement will be done by the government agencies, or the BPL patients will get cross-subsidized. There could be reimbursement through central and state insurance schemes. So in India, various states have their insurance schemes. The government of India in 2018 has also launched Ayushman Bharat scheme, which cover 500 million beneficiaries in India. And we will also talk about that scheme in the subsequent slides. And the final mode of payment is revenue from private or the market patients, or the payment from these set of patients. So these are the three modes of payment through which the private sector can recover its capital and the operational and maintenance expenditure. The final and the most complex P is the performance monitoring. Now, if we look at the components or the constituents of healthcare value chain, there are typically four components. The first component is the infrastructure, which involves hospital building, canteen, ambulance, and support infrastructure. This is the first component. The second component is equipments, which includes diagnostic equipments such as X-ray, CT scan, MRI, blood testing equipments. The third set of component is clinical services, which typically includes services for outpatient department, inpatient department, hospital emergency, disaster management, operation theater, diagnostic services. And the last component is non-clinical services, which basically includes provisioning for support services like operation and maintenance of grounds, gardens, security, car parking, to name a few. Now, we have seen projects in India which has involved all four components, where the private sector is responsible for infrastructure, equipments, clinical and non-clinical services. We have seen projects where infrastructure and equipments have been provided by the government agency, and the private sector is only responsible for clinical services and non-clinical services. So basically, there can be various models, and each model has to be customized. there is no one shoe fit all approach which can be followed for healthcare infrastructure and for PPPs in healthcare. Now, another important aspect in healthcare PPP is efficient and multi-layered monitoring mechanisms. So while in typical infrastructure projects like highways, railways, we have this concept of independent engineer who is typically involved in monitoring the construction and operations. But in healthcare, we have added layers of complexities. These are more because of the clinical and non-clinical services. And so for this, we need different multi-layered monitoring mechanisms, and these could be in form of healthcare consultant. It could be in form of surveys among users and stakeholders. It could be in form of self disclosures by the private sector in terms of how they are managing the clinical and non-clinical services. In addition, there are various accreditation requirements for healthcare infrastructure. So for in India, we have regulatory authorities like NABH, which provides accreditation for it's a national accreditation board for hospitals and healthcare providers. We have agency by NABL, which is a national accreditation board for testing and calibration laboratories. We have Medical Council of India. So depending on the project type, the different and various accreditation requirements are to be fulfilled by the private sector. So I think these are the 4 P's. Before we start designing a PPP project, a government agency needs to first form up what is the objective, which P and how they want to manage the same. I think these are 4 very important considerations for healthcare infrastructure projects. Now, I will present 5 case studies on PPP projects implemented in healthcare sector in India. What I will like to emphasize before I go into these case studies, that in case of healthcare, as I mentioned earlier, one shoe fit all approach needs to be avoided. There is no one right model. We cannot say that this is the right model, this is the best model, and entire Nigeria needs to follow this model. If anybody says that, they are passing a wrong statement. What is needed is customized solution. This customized solution will be based on the location. The customized solution will be based on what is the current infrastructure in the city. It will be based on the financial capacity of the government agency, whether they can provide grants, whether they can provide subsidies or not. And it will also be based on what is the population of the city, town, where we are looking at developing this infrastructure. So a sincere request here is that we will need to develop customized solutions, and we cannot just apply a model from India, Australia, UK into Nigeria. It cannot be retrofitted from some other country. It has to be customized. And in this case studies which I'm going to present, you are going to see different PPP models. So we will see PPP projects which have been implemented on O&M basis. We will see PPP projects which have been implemented on DBFOT model. We will see concession period ranging from 5 years to 99 years. That's quite a range. So there are PPP projects which have been awarded only for 5 years, and there are PPP projects which have been awarded for a period of 99 years. We will see projects in which government is providing construction grant. The government is also providing operational grant. We are also going to see projects in which government is not providing any grant. They are taking one-time premium at the time of commercial closure, and they are also requesting private player to share revenues during the concession period. So here, basically, in my presentation now, I will cover models, and here I will cover PPP projects across the value chain. So we will see projects in the primary healthcare, secondary healthcare, and the tertiary healthcare. The first case study is from the state of Uttarakhand, which is in northern part of India. So this was a PPP project where 13 mobile vans were operated on PPP basis. So basically, the government agency procured 13 mobile vans fitted with medical equipment such as X-ray and ultrasound machines. The MHVs were capable of providing emergency medical services during disaster and epidemics. Uttarakhand is a hilly terrain, and at times it can be difficult to reach hospitals. So if you are in the remote area, it might be difficult to reach to cities. So many times, we see unfortunate deaths, casualties as people are getting transported. So this was a very customized requirement wherein the mobile health vans will also provide diagnostic and clinical services as the patients are getting transported. The agreement was signed with two private players. Basically, one mobile van was procured for each district. The bidding parameter here was the lowest annual grant. So the government provided the vans and they also provided annual grant. The concession period was 5 years. So the private player was primarily responsible for operation and maintenance of the vans, and the project cost was around $2.38 million. Now, if you look at the project structure, I think this slide you will find very interesting. The obligations of the government agency was to provide 13 vans for 13 districts. The government provided concession of 5 years, and the bidding parameter, as I mentioned, was lowest annual grant. Sorry. The obligation of the private sector was to operate and maintain 13 mobile health vans. They organized outreach camps for medical services, and they also provided medical staff who were responsible for clinical and diagnostic services, and they responded to emergency and disaster situations. So in the state of Uttarakhand, we have seen frequent flooding, cloudburst, snowing. So I think many times we have emergency situations there. And they were also responsible to procure and supply medicine. In the contract document which was signed, the government specified two types of patients: below poverty line patients and private patients. For below poverty line patients, the private sector was reimbursed by the government, and for the private patients, the user charges were directly collected by the private sector at a pre-specified fixed rates. So this was one project developed on O&M basis for a period of 5 years, and the role of private sector was more to provide clinical and non-clinical services. They were not really involved in procuring equipments and developing infrastructure. The second project is on community healthcare center. This is again a primary healthcare project. This was developed in 16 locations in Uttarakhand. Here, the bidding parameter was slightly complex. It was a mix of fixed grant and variable grant. So there were two types of fixed grant. One was for the capital cost, and second was for the O&M cost. And there was also a variable grant, which was provided by the government. The concession period here was 5+5. So if the performance is good in the first 5 years, the concessionaire and government can mutually extend the contract for another 5 years. Each community health center here comprised of 30 beds. Here, if we look at the structure, what you will see here is that the model is very different. In the previous PPP project, the infrastructure and equipments were procured by the government agency. Here, the private sector is involved in upgrading the infrastructure. They were responsible to provide clinical and support clinical services. They provided facility management services, and they also recruited, retained, and managed staff. Here, the contract, as I mentioned, was 5+5 years. The government provided medicines and ambulance services. Here, there was no distinction of private patients or below poverty line patients. So this was open for all the patients. So the SPV provided clinical and support clinical services to the patients. The patients paid user charges at government rates to the committee of government, and then this committee basically paid the fixed grant and the variable grant, which was based on actual number of diagnostic procedures, maternity cases. So this model was quite different from the earlier model in terms of the concession period, the role of the private sector, the type of patient. The third project is from the state of Andhra Pradesh in southern part of the country. So this involved 4 government hospitals in cities of Vishakhapatnam, Warangal, Kannur, and Kakinada. The government hospitals were not able to offer specialized services like CT scan and MRI. And basically, government signed an agreement with a consortium comprising of Wipro and Medal Healthcare. This agreement was signed in July 2010. So the average price per scan was the bidding parameter. And it is important to note here that the price was 50% less than the current market rate. And here it happened more because there was surety in terms of the demand for the project. So the demand risk and the credit risk was taken care of through project structuring. Here again, government only provided built up area. So the government provided the first component. The private player was responsible for procurement and installation of equipments, refurbish the built up space, operate and maintain the diagnostic center, and provide clinical and non-clinical staff. Here there were 2 types of patients, referral patients who were sent from the hospital and the private patients. There was a budgetary cap for referral patients and the price was the bidding parameter which the private sector quoted.
Sorry, we seem to have a technical problem with Mohit.
Yes,
Let's
yes,
just wait for him to come back.
Yes,
Okay, you're
I'm
back.
back. Yeah. My sincere apologies for getting disconnected. So I'm back. So basically here there were 2 types of patients, the referral patients and the private patients. And the price for the private patients was fixed at 1.5 times the referral patients. This was the model. I think I will skip this case study. I think I'm way beyond the time allocated to me. So I will quickly cover this case study. This is very interesting. This is from again the northern part of the country, wherein super specialty hospitals were developed in locations of Bhatinda and Mohali. So basically, there was a lot of high incidence of cancer in the region, and the government was not able to provide cancer treatment facilities. So the government of Punjab signed an agreement with Max Healthcare Institute in 2009. The bidding parameter was upfront premium. So this project is more like a mall type of project which we see. Like if you develop a marketing mall, here the government only provided the land for the project, which was like 3.15 acres. They provided a lease of 50 years. And here there was no subsidy from the government. On contrary, the government has taken one-time premium from the private sector. They have also, the private sector has also shared revenue. So here we can see that the government is not able to provide subsidy. They have provided land, and this project is only at a market driven prices. So the private player is responsible for development on DBFOT, design, build, finance, operate, transfer. The private player was responsible for installation and procurement of equipments. They provided clinical and support services. The government provided concession for 50 years and they provided support in applicable formats. Now, if we try to summarize the 5 case studies which I have briefly discussed, what we see, the scope is very different. In some cases, it is only clinical and non-clinical, whereas in some cases like Bhatinda and Mohali, it covers the entire value chain, starting from infrastructure, equipments, clinical and non-clinical. The PPP model is also very different. In projects like community health care centers in Uttarakhand, it is an operation and maintenance model, whereas in Jalandhar in Punjab, it is DBFOT model. The payment mechanism is also very different. In some cases, as I mentioned earlier, government has provided capital grant and operational grant, whereas in some other projects, it's the premium which the government is receiving from the private sector. Here again, the concession periods are from 5 years to 99 years, as I mentioned. The patient mix also, we have seen a good amount of variation just in these 4 case studies. We have seen private patients, we have seen BPL patients, we have seen referral patients. So we have seen all possible types of combinations. In some case, the reimbursements are based on actual services. In some case, it's capital grant and operational grant. So basically, to summarize this section, what I would say again is there is no one shoe fit all approach. It has to be a customized approach, which will vary from city to city, province to province. And I think all the decision makers, policy makers, government agencies will need to keep that in mind once they design the projects and decide to go ahead. I think so basically now I have 2 or 3 slides wherein I would like to discuss what the government agencies in Nigeria need to do and what are the considerations for the private sector and the government sector which they ensure are covered. See, at the end of the day, when we look at private sector, they will want that the project is planned properly, they get proper support from government in terms of the support infrastructure, the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined in terms of what will government do and what will private sector do. So I think that is one first and clear requirement from the private sector. I think the second clear requirement is clear identification of pricing mechanisms. What are the applicable prices? And what I have learned, what we have learned is it is good if we can have uniform prices. If the prices for below poverty line patients is kept lower than the prices for private patients, then there is possibility of discrimination. So this is something which both private and government sector officials have told us. So if a private sector operator gets paid more for services to private patients, then there can be a tendency wherein they will want to focus more on the private patients and tend to discriminate the vulnerable sections of the society. So I think the pricing mechanism should be clearly defined, and ideally it should be uniform pricing policies which should be applicable for both BPL and private patients. I think timely clearances of payment is the most important requirement. I think there should be strict adherence. I think if we look at infrastructure projects globally, not only in healthcare sector, I think one of the biggest grievances of the private sector is that money is not released in time. The systems and processes are very complex. The payment clearing mechanism is very cumbersome. So I think one of the clear-cut requirement is to have single point clearance system. The government should create a payment reserve account. So in case the payments are getting delayed, the private sector can draw from that payment reserve account, and it should have funds for 3 months of reimbursement. I think another requirement from the private sector is clear and executable performance specifications. So the general feedback from the private sector in India is that the specification tends to be too detailed, and the focus is more on input specifications rather than the output specifications. Because if you look at a hospital, they might have state-of-art infrastructure, but if the casualty is very high and if people are not going home and if the death rates are high, then the state-of-art infrastructure is good for nothing. So I think it's important to have good output specifications as well. But having said that, there should be flexibility in monitoring. Private sector will not want day-to-day monitoring and over-monitoring by the government sector. Another important requirement from the private sector is to have payment safeguards. One other important feedback we have received is that many times when a diagnostic center is created inside a government hospital, there is a tendency of doctors to refer patients to other diagnostic centers because they might get commission, and the facilities created through PPP projects are not utilized. So there should be proper checks and balances to protect the interest of the private sector. I think another important aspect is that healthcare projects in general are not viable. Viability is a serious concern in healthcare projects, and the viability will need to be improved, and we will need to look at multiple mechanisms. These mechanisms could be soft loan which is provided to the project SPV. It could be through capital grant, operational grant, higher concession period. We might need to look at tax and fiscal concessions to make the project viable. So these are some of the requirements which the private sector typically has in terms of expectation from PPP projects. And I would say these are the key success factors. It's not that projects have not failed in India. Many PPP projects have also failed in India. And these have failed because these 6 requirements were not met adequately. I think the requirements from the government is also very clear. I think government wants to have an established health network which covers primary, secondary, and diagnostic healthcare facilities. I think the focus of government is to provide universal coverage. The government is more keen to provide services to BPL patients, below poverty line patients. Government is also keen that if they are paying good amount of operational grant, capital grant, the performance specifications and performance standards are properly met. That is one concern which government has. Government says we are providing land, we are providing grants. How do we monitor that the clinical services are good, the patients are happy, and the private sector is doing what they are supposed to do? I think these are clear-cut requirements from governments. And to ensure the first 2 points are met, I think there are ways and means to ensure we can have efficient and multi-layered monitoring. As I had mentioned earlier, we could look at independent engineers, which are there for typical infrastructure projects. We need to build mechanisms for surveys among users and stakeholders. We could also look at concept of healthcare consultant who can continuously review the performance and services provided by the private sector. Ensure the private sector is meeting all the required accreditation. Like in India, we have NABH, NABL, MCI. Those are bare minimum, which should be adhered to. I think what government of Kenya needs to do to have a successful PPP program is to look at innovative funding structures. I think it's a no-brainer. It's a well-established fact that PPPs in healthcare will require a lot of viability support. I think it will be important that government can set up a health fund wherein adequate and timely payments can be made, both for the capital grant and operational grant. Government can look at pulling in funds in this health fund. It could be funding under the corporate social responsibility. It could be funding from donor agencies, grant funding from philanthropic agencies. So I think government will need to look at pooling of funds. I think this is very important for PPP projects to succeed in healthcare sector, to have fund which can provide confidence to the private sector that they will get what they are supposed to get in due time. And it's also important to have standardized model concession agreements. So what we have realized in India is that model concession agreements for the healthcare sector is very different from what we will have for sectors like airports, railways, ports. CRISIL was actually involved in preparing model healthcare concession agreements for Ministry of Finance and Asian Development Bank. I was leading that project, and we had actually prepared model concession agreements for 6 sectors: primary healthcare, secondary healthcare, tertiary healthcare, brownfield hospitals, greenfield hospitals, and diagnostic centers. So we prepared model templates. We also prepared practitioners guide for each agreement to guide the government agencies how to customize the agreements, ensuring patient mix, pricing mix, reimbursement, and penalties are taken care of. So, so I think these are some of the key requirements which the government agencies needs to ensure. These are some of the enabling mechanisms which needs to be put in place before we try and attempt healthcare PPPs. So I have one more section. I know I'm running late by 10 minutes. So if Mr. Chidi is fine, I could go ahead present it, or shall I complete my presentation here?
No, I think it's okay to present. What is going to happen is I'm going to appeal to the participants and everybody. This is very, very key. Your presentation and Natalia's. We will sacrifice 10 minutes in the question and answer.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Chidi. So moving forward, I think in this slide, what we have tried, so this section has 3 subsections. First section, we are covering how COVID-19 could impact PPP. Then I will briefly talk about the Ayushman Bharat scheme, which the government of India has launched in 2018. And then I will talk about Arogya Setu app, which has been developed by government of India to track COVID-19 patients. So if we look at PPP projects, COVID-19 is going to impact all the stages of PPP project lifecycle. For example, if you look at PPP origination and preparation, so usually the government agencies and the donor agencies set aside budgets for project preparation. So here, obviously, there will be difficulty in providing budgets for the PPP projects. I think that is definitely going to happen. There will be delay in preparation of feasibility reports. So the projects which are currently under preparation, typically PPP projects will involve willingness to pay surveys. They will involve site visits. They will involve site interactions, stakeholder interactions. So I think all of that will get delayed. Similarly, a lot of approvals are required for PPP projects from regulatory and government agencies like PPP Node, PPP Center, Ministry of Finance. So I think surely that is not the focus right now. So I think the PPP project preparation stages will surely get impacted, and I think project preparation will definitely get delayed by 3 to 6 months. It will also have impact on PPP procurement. So generally, when countries are doing PPP projects, they are looking at regional procurement and international procurement depending on the project size. So for example, if we are doing a project in Nigeria, we would typically look at private sector from countries like maybe Ethiopia, Kenya, Ghana. So with lockdown all around, with no movement of flights and all, so there will be delay in PPP procurement, and government agencies will need to delay market sounding, pre-bid meetings, etc., which will lead to delay in commercial closure and signing of the agreements. Similarly, PPP projects will also have an impact on construction, on operations. So there will be disruptions in construction. So in many countries like India, France, Italy, there has been a total lockdown. So if a highway project is under construction, it will definitely get stopped due to unavailability of labor, and the projects will get delayed by 3 to 6 months. Similarly, projects which are operational, there will be loss of volume of users during and after lockdown, which will hurt cash flows. So we will see impact of COVID on all the stages of PPP life cycle. Now, what are the measures to mitigate? I think it is imperative and very important that force majeure clause is properly defined and clearly captured in the PPP agreement. Basically, force majeure is triggered when we have unforeseen circumstances, which is beyond reasonable control of the parties. It can be an event of God or non-God events. It could be because of flooding, earthquake, riots, nationalization. These are some of the diseases, examples of force majeure. And the private sector needs to be compensated for change in law and for force majeure clauses. So I think it is very important that the force majeure clauses are standardized. I think we have seen that force majeure is not clearly defined in terms of definition, and there is a lot of inconsistency. They are interpreted differently by government agencies and the private sector. And I think it is important. This force majeure event across the globe has clearly defined the importance of clearly defining the force majeure and the impact and the way out. I think it is important that a commission is appointed for PPP projects wherein they can assess the impact of the lockdown. Mathematical tools are needed to be deployed to assess direct and indirect macroeconomic effects from COVID-19. the mathematical tools need to consider both the historical and current scenario, and they will need to redraw forecast to look at how the private sector has been impacted from the PPP project, and what is the compensation which the government agency needs to pay to the private sector. So I think these are some of the impacts of COVID on PPP projects in general. It will differ from project to project, from country to country, and location to location. So I think at a project level, this assessment will need to be undertaken. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I will quickly cover the Ayushman Bharat scheme. It's a landmark scheme of Government of India, wherein government is looking at covering 500 million people or 100 million households. So on an average in India, each household have 5 people. So basically, this provides a medical insurance coverage of around $7,000 per family per year. And there is no cap on family size, age, or gender, and all the pre-existing conditions are covered. Basically, this covers 3 days of pre-hospitalization and 15 days of post-hospitalization expenses. This is what the scheme is all about. The scheme is developed with share of center and state in expenses in a ratio of 60:40. Now, if we look at the progress in last 2 odd years, the government has issued 124 million e-cards. More than close to 10 million people have been treated. Over 21,000 hospitals have been empaneled. So I think what we see from this scheme is that the demand side is getting taken care of. Government is ensuring that people can afford healthcare services, but what is needed is the supply. What is needed is adequate infrastructure where people can go and get these services. And this is where PPPs can play a big role. PPPs can help in creation of that infrastructure, and they can marry well, and there can be a good collaboration with the Ayushman Bharat scheme which the government has launched. The last, this is the last slide of the presentation. This is basically the Arogya Setu app. It's an innovative app which Government of India has launched. Basically, given the huge population base, wherein we have close to over 1.3 billion people in India, there is need to actively track the infected people to prevent spread. So basically, there is an app which has been created, and the users needs to install this app on their mobile. And based on their location history, they are mapped. So there are geotag updates. And if any non-COVID patient comes in touch or comes in range of the COVID-19 patient, then an alert is sent. So basically here more than 50 million downloads have been seen in last 1 month or so. And government in India has, created 4 zones: green, yellow, red, and containment zones. So basically government has identified 130 hotspots through this app. And now government is looking at making this app mandatory for people flying, for people traveling through trains, aircrafts, and in some government office. So I think, thank you so much. It was really nice to make this presentation. We are really grateful to Mr. Chidi and to Government of Nigeria for giving us an opportunity to make this presentation. I apologize again for additional time I have taken. Now I think Ms. Natalia from SDG Consulting will be making the presentation. So Mr. Chidi, if it's fine, I would like to hand over the presentation to Ms. Natalia. And
just give him the button like a relay race.
Sure. And Suhas from my team, I would request you to kindly share your screen so that you can take it forward. And thank you very much to all the participants. I will get back to you to respond to your questions once Ms. Natalia completes her presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Is it possible that I share my screen? I think it would be easier for me.
So can you give over control to Natalia so she can share her screen?
Yeah. I think screen sharing is only allowed to me and Suhas. Suhas, just check if Ms. Natalia can share. If possible, go ahead. Else, you may go ahead with sharing the screen.
Is it my screen or this is the, okay. Do you see it or?
Yes, can you put it on slideshow? I think it's your screen.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. So, good morning or good afternoon to everyone. Greetings from Frankfurt. Thanks for invitation to speak at this excellent event. And by the way, compliments to previous speaker, excellent presentation, really. The previous speaker spoke about classical public-private partnerships in the healthcare sector, and I think my presentation will be complementary. I will take a little bit different angle and different perspective how public-private partnerships could be used to fight coronavirus. Maybe, okay. Maybe just a few words about myself. I'm a founder and managing director of the company SDG 17 Consulting GmbH based in Frankfurt. I have 3 diplomas. I'm an engineer. I have a diploma in environmental management and master degree in intellectual property rights. And public-private partnerships and sustainable development goals, my passion and my profession. And by the way, we organized quite a number of international events in Frankfurt, 2 international conferences on PPPs and healthcare, and also a special event, Women for Sustainable Infrastructure, where we discuss gender mainstreaming in a PPP project. So let me start from describing the current situation and the prospects. As you know, there is no vaccine yet developed against COVID-19, and in very optimistic scenario, it will be available only in 12 months. It means that we have to accept living with COVID-19 for at least 1 year. The experts saying that even the vaccine will be available in 12 months, it will still require some time for its mass production, mass distribution, vaccination that would take another 4 and 5 years. In pessimistic scenario, no vaccine is available. And WHO experts actually saying this is quite possible and warns about coronavirus might never go away. So we have to live a new normal and have to adjust accordingly. So the challenge is just too big for governments. COVID-19 is such a major event that exposes the lack of preparedness and resilience of the increasingly globalized and interconnected world. And it certainly will not be the last pandemic. We have to keep it in mind. Actually, we have spreads of new deadly viruses occurring almost every year. SARS, MERS, Ebola, Zika virus, and governments and policymakers not able to cope alone. So they are currently in search for immediate and innovative solutions to close the gap in delivery of healthcare infrastructure, to track the spread of the virus, to ensure patients get the care they need, and frontline workers get essential supplies and information, and how to accelerate development of vaccines, tests, and treatments. This creates new opportunities for the private sector to get involved. So why public-private partnerships? COVID-19 will trigger a lot of rethinking of how health systems should work. We are facing a crisis that requires swift and smart solutions and also agility in dealing with. It creates new opportunities for the private sector to work along public sector and to share their expertise and resources. Public-private partnerships could be part of the solution. PPPs could be very instrumental in responding to COVID-19. They offer innovations, extra resources otherwise not available, and which is critical in emergency situation. So let's have a look in some cases around the world. And let's start from Australia, which is the example of the classical healthcare project. Australia announced a healthcare PPP to fight corona, to secure 30,000 hospital beds and more than 100,000 staff. The federal government will offer agreements to more than 600 private and non-for-profit hospitals to ensure their viability in return for maintenance and capacity during pandemic. So let's come back to India. We heard a lot, but I found a very interesting example, and I cite this example because this is public-private partnerships, not with the private company, but with non-governmental organization. And I find it very interesting. Also because what they've done, they reorientate the already existing public-private partnerships to address COVID-19. So basically, the both clinics were normally providing preventive and curative care to the population residing in the islands. But now the same both clinics are responding to coronavirus disease by carrying out door-to-door community surveillance in the river islands. So this example was already mentioned today. Yes, it's also actually a public-private partnership, huge number of downloads, very popular app. Let's move on. European Union. European Union already already for some years using public-private partnership modality for early drug development. And now they just fuel extra funding to already existing public-private partnership to address development of vaccine against coronavirus, about 90 million euro, half of which coming, by the way, from the private sector. And just look at the impressive numbers. The whole budget available for this PPP in the last tranche, which is 6 years from 2014-2020, is more than 3 billion euro, half of it mobilized by the private sector. Iceland developed the public-private partnerships for test developments. It's a public-private partnership between National University Hospital of Iceland and a private company, Decode Genetics, very famous company, by the way. It aims to test the population and to learn more about coronaviruses. Decode Genetics was already participating in the other public-private partnerships, a very famous one, according to the Act on the Health Sector database. Actually, it was commissioned to develop a centralized national database of medical records and genetical data. Another very interesting example how public-private partnership modality could be applied for IT projects, for instance, it's United States. In US, government, academia, and industry struck a PPP called COVID-19 High Performance Computing Consortium to allow researchers tackling COVID-19 and to access high performance computing resources. Members of the consortium include IBM, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and Department of Energy National Labs. Germany, PPP Health for All. The global pandemic like COVID-19 demonstrated that more coordination and mobilization of networks is required. And PPP Health for All is a multi-stakeholder knowledge platform to facilitate development of sustainable and PPP-centered PPP projects in the healthcare sector. It strives to connect all PPP stakeholders in one ecosystem and to identify and collect innovative solutions in fighting coronavirus. So basically what PPP Health for All does, first of all, it collects the historical data about existing PPP projects. It will be a visual map where everyone could have a look. For instance, Nigeria, how many PPP projects in Nigeria, how many projects in India. Also, at the moment, there are open calls. If you're aware about any interesting cases you would like to share, you could share this information with PPP Health for All. You could participate in the stakeholder consultation pilot, and you're invited to submit your, if you're a PPP professional, you're invited to submit your opinions and contributions. So, from my side, I think the main conclusion, it's time to innovate. Let's engage with all non-public partners, not only private companies, which normally the case in a classical PPP healthcare project, but also with non-governmental organizations, faith organizations, research institutions. There is also a possibility to reorientate existing PPPs to offer additional services related to COVID-19, for instance, like I mentioned already, PPP boat clinics in India. Let's also encourage private sector initiatives, allow the initiatives from non-public partners through unsolicited proposals, and here special procurement rules could be applied. Let's also innovate where and how PPPs could be applied. In health sector, PPP have evolved over the last decade, and they go beyond the infrastructure, include also service delivery, project delivery, product development, IT applications, etc. So if time allows, I will be happy to introduce my company and some initiatives from Germany. What do you think? Do I have time?
Yeah, no, you can do that very quickly. I mean, if you can do it under 2 or 3 minutes,
Okay.
that would be appreciated so that we can get back on time.
All right, thanks. So the company that I have a pleasure to represent today is the SDG 17 Consulting GmbH. Advocates policies and practices that encourage development of low carbon, climate resilient infrastructure delivered through sustainable and people first public-private partnerships. We're also certified experts of International Financial Corporation, Tool Edge on green buildings. So our work is organized around 3 pillars: sustainable development goals, how to translate them into the healthcare infrastructure projects. We're dealing with public-private partnerships and assisting developing countries in improving their healthcare infrastructure through PPP modalities. And also, we're very interested in sustainable, innovative healthcare, digital solutions for healthcare. I think an opportunity for developing countries to make a leapfrogging, like mobile applications, e-health, etc., telemedicine. I would like to mention some important initiatives which we're part of. One is we are a member of the Alliance for Climate and Development, which is an initiative of the government of Germany. We're a signatory of Pledge of Healthcare Climate Challenge. We're a member of the UN Sustainable Building and Construction Program, and we're also signatory of the Women's Empowerment Principles. I'm mentioning these initiatives because I think it's interesting for representatives of the private companies who are listening to this presentation, so they could also join these initiatives. We have also a number of social commitments. We're leading the working group on partnerships and working group on digital solutions for global health within Global Health Hub Germany. I will be talking about this initiative later, a little bit later. We're leading PPP Health for All, which I already mentioned. We are also signed a memorandum with European Connected Health Alliance on development of ecosystem on digital solutions for global health in Hessen, here in Germany. We are a member of the strategic committee of the World Association of PPP Units and PPP Professionals. And also I'm PPP speaker of German Health Alliance. And just a couple of words about Global Health Hub Germany. This is a multi-stakeholder network across sectors and stakeholders. The hub was inaugurated last year in February by Minister of Health, Jens Spahn. It has about 20 working groups, and I have a pleasure and honor to coordinate a working group on partnerships for global health. We have about 60 members, representatives of private sector, KfW, Melinda Bill Gates Foundation, research institutions. And I would like to address the audience. If you're interested to join, please contact me. Also, I would like to introduce to you the German Health Alliance, which is the international voice of German health industry. It's, in my view, the most powerful representative association of health industry in Germany. And I'm also happy to serve a link if you're interested to establish the contact with this organization as well. Thank you very much. And I hope I didn't take too much time.
Well, Natalia, thank you very much, and thanks to you and Mohit. I'm sure if we were not in the new normal, we would have given the both of you a big round of applause. So whatever it is, take our claps and everything. Before we go into the Q&A session,